What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael Borky. After one of the craziest, most unique sports news days we've had in a while, on statewide radio in Mississippi today, we spent the entire day talking about Alabama baseball. It's been the craziest story, or most unique story, I guess I should say, in my 9-year career here since Hugh Freeze got fired, I think. Maybe not local, but in terms of the implications and the uniqueness of it, a wild day in college baseball and SEC sports in general. So we're going to talk about that, but more specifically, what I think the SEC and the NCAA, if they can ever get their act together, need to do right now in the wake of this Alabama baseball schedule. But please, before we get into that, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. I do live streams. We'll do more of them when football season comes, but also the occasional posting of videos on this channel. So hit that bell so you know when I post or when I go live. So here's the story from ESPN. I'm not going to read the entire thing. It's from David Purdom at ESPN. Just in case you have not seen this, if you've been under a rock today, here's the story of the day. Alabama baseball coach Brad Bohannon was fired Thursday, today, amid a widespread investigation into suspicious betting activity on the Crimson Tide's game against LSU 6 days ago. Alabama starting pitcher was a very, very late scratch. That information wasn't publicly known, but a bet was made in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they have found a way to trace it back to Brad Bohannon. More from the story. Sportsbook surveillance video indicated that the person who placed the bets was communicating with Bohannon at the time. Multiple sources with direct information about the investigation told ESPN. The school announced that athletic director Greg Byrne has, quote, initiated the termination process for Bohannon for, quote, among other things, violating the standards, duties, and principles. I added that word. Forgive me. One take. We're just going to go with it. Violating the standards, duties, and responsibilities, not principles, but I guess it's the same thing, expected of university employees. Jason Jackson serving as the interim coach, according to the school, and multiple other outlets have reported that the investigation is focused around Bohannon and not on any Alabama players. So let's put the insanity of this story aside, because a SEC head coach, I know it's not football, I know it's not basketball, but an SEC head coach got fired today because he was involved to some degree with a suspicious bet placed against his team. That still has yet to really sink in with me, is the fact that an SEC head coach got fired for that today. And the stupidity of how they got caught, let's put that aside for a second, even though, as you can imagine, college baseball games don't get bet on very often. When they do, it's not a high volume of money. Any large amount of money on any college baseball game was always going to draw red flags. But the stupidity of having alleged direct conversation from the coach who knew that his starter was not going to pitch to the person that placed the bet is shocking. Just a shocking level of stupidity. It's hard to fathom how stupid that is. But let's put that aside for a second, because that's been talked about a lot. What needs to happen in the wake of this story is the SEC and Greg Sankey, and even the NCAA, but I have far less faith in the NCAA, they need to act now. And I mean, they need to be harsh about this now. Because frankly, they're really lucky this wasn't a football game. Could you imagine if this identical story, maybe not involving Nick Saban, because I don't think he's that stupid, but if this situation came from the Alabama LSU football game and the implications that would come with that? They're lucky it's just baseball, but they also can use baseball as an opportunity to bring a hammer down and to end this behavior forever. Because as you guys know, and as we talk about on the show a lot, and I've talked about with you guys on here, college sports is changing a lot. It is in flux, and some fans like it, some fans don't, and there's this debate on whether or not all of these changes are good for the sport. But one thing that has not been discussed at all since the widespread legalization of sports gambling a few years ago was a game being thrown. The integrity of a game has not been in question realistically yet. I know there's been bad calls and stuff, and people have questioned officials, but I mean, from a gambling perspective, this hasn't happened yet in college sports. It was probably bound to happen eventually, but it hasn't happened yet. And so we have to, I say we like I'm a decision maker, this has to be the only time this happens. This has to be nipped in the bud right now. Right now. Because competitive integrity of games is vital for having fans that are willing to buy into and engage with the product. If there is ever a feeling, a widespread feeling like the games are fixed and the outcomes are inevitable, then you've got a real problem on your hands outside of the competitive imbalance that exists in college sports already, and the budget sizes being dramatically different, and the NIL stuff being different. But once you start questioning the integrity of the outcomes, you've got a real problem on your hand. They can look weak. The SEC and the NCAA can look weak, and behavior like this has to be curbed right away. And the beauty of this, if from their perspective, is they can punish this harshly, strongly, without any pushback. When the NCAA did their investigations of the past, think Ohio State, for example. Remember when Ohio State got punished and Jim Tressel, national championship winning head coach Jim Tressel, got fired? Remember what happened, what that was about? Players sold their own merchandise. The stuff that they owned, they sold it and got money and free tattoos for it, and that cost a coach's job. Some people wanted Ohio State to burn because they hate Ohio State. Other people were like, wait a minute, hold on. This doesn't make sense. This is very stupid. Why are you punishing people for selling their own merchandise? There was always a debate around NCAA investigations, whether their rules were being enforced fairly, if there was selective enforcement, if it was morally wrong. Not in this case. Everybody agrees that what allegedly happened with Alabama and Brad Bohannon is wrong. You can't punish the players, or at least I don't think you should punish the players in this deal, because if it is true and they were not involved at all, I don't think, for example, banning them from postseasons is a just punishment, but you have to do something. You have to punish the institution. Take some of their television dollar check that they get from the SEC away and make it a really, really significant amount of money. You have got to punish the institution beyond just letting them fire their baseball coach, because the message has to be sent across college football, college sports, not just college football, but especially because of college football, that this cannot happen again. That gambling cannot happen with the players. That gambling cannot happen with the coaches. You cannot have sportsbook apps on your phone. You cannot give inside information to anybody. If you are hurt and it is not on an injury report, you do not tell anybody about it. Also, I think this is a great time for them to implement injury reports that are done the same way the NFL are, where they have to be accurate. They have to be reported every day, like practice, limited participant, no participant, full participant. I think that day has now come. We've talked about that a lot on the radio show as well, but I think that day has arrived. Universal, governed, legislated injury reports, they have to come now. Because now that you know that somebody in the SEC has allegedly used that information to manipulate a sports book and benefit from that, possible legal ramifications for doing that, by the way, you have to stop it. And one way to stop what Brad Bohannon allegedly did is by making injury reports universal. Copy the NFL's model and do it the exact same way. That can at least take some of this away. I think that needs to happen now. And as a secondary reason, I think, generally speaking, you fans deserve the chance to know if your players are playing or not, specifically the people that are paying their salaries. Speaking of NIL, I think you deserve the right to know if the guy that you're paying for is on the field or not. That's just me. But more importantly, it is about gambling. The institution has to be punished, not just the coach. It's a remarkably stupid thing. It's hard to wrap your mind around. But Greg Sankey and the SEC have to end this practice immediately, or else people are going to start questioning the outcomes of games often. And by the way, what they have to do with Alabama baseball, what makes this so widespread is that every game that Alabama has lost this season has to be investigated. Every single game that Alabama has played and lost this season has to be investigated. They have to look at personnel decisions. They have to look at phone calls. They have to look at bets on sports books around the country on or against Alabama baseball. They have to do that now. This investigation has to be widespread and sweeping, and the conclusion cannot be just the coach getting fired. Greg Sankey needs to come down hard. Regulations need to be put in place, including injury reports. There needs to be some kind of monitoring similar to what the NFL does. They punish players often for betting on not the NFL sometimes, and people make fun of that. And the NFL is just in doing that. You've got to end this behavior, and you've got to end it now, because the competitive integrity of the games is the only thing that everybody can agree on. And right now, there's a reason to question it. So you got to end it. Also, there's a couple of things that got brought up on the radio show today. Number one, I saw some, this is what happens. This is what you get when you legalize sports gambling. The exact opposite is true. The legalization of sports gambling is how they caught this. You've always been able to put bets on games if you knew the right guy. In this case, since it was done through legal means, they had the checks and balances in place to be able to flag suspicious activity and investigate it and catch the guy doing it. The fact that it's legal now was able to catch a coach that was possibly engaging in nefarious behavior. And then the other thing that got brought up that it took me 12 minutes to get to, but that's okay. Mentioned the NCAA before and how I don't have faith in them. The NCAA has a charge called lack of institutional control. And they've usually applied that to things like boosters paying players. Kind of a joke now in hindsight. But when you look at everything that's happened at Alabama just over the last few months, with the basketball situation, with player getting arrested on capital murder charges, 2 more players being present at the scene at a minimum. You've had basketball signee or a commitment anyway get arrested. You've had a football player get arrested. You've had a high-ranking member in the athletic department get arrested. The handling of the basketball situation was an embarrassment. At this point, when you add this in here, there is no control over the institution. When somebody tells me that lack of institutional control is applicable, this is the exact situation where it should apply, in my opinion. Alabama athletics is a dumpster fire. It's out of control right now, and somebody needs to be punished. Somebody needs to take control, and the NCAA and the SEC need to set an example of Alabama baseball to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again on the next one.